Greetings, this is Charles Darwin, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about the brain, illusion, and delusion. You see, we all live in a world of illusion. Let me explain what I mean by that. You see, we do not perceive the environment exactly the way it is. What we actually experience is a model of reality that is created by our brains. What our brains do is use sensory information from the environment and then from that construct a reality. Let me give you some examples. There's no such thing as color out in the natural world. There's just different wavelengths of photons. That's all it is. Some of those photons reflect more than others from this shirt and are absorbed by certain cells in the retina of the eyes, and then the optic nerve carries impulses to the brain, and our brain interprets this shirt as being green. It's not really green, but our brains interpret it that way. Same thing with this red book. There are wavelengths of light that are reflected, different ones from this, and absorbed by different cells in the retina, sending a different set of messages to the brain, and our brains interpret this as being red. Now, it would be far too confusing if our brains were able to perceive every different wavelength of photon. If you're thinking in terms of primates looking for ripe fruit, the unripe fruits would be green, the ripe fruits would be red. And so it's quicker and easier to tell the difference between green and red than to actually think about all the different wavelengths of light. So in this case, the model of reality created by our brains in response to light absorbed by our eyes is actually making life easier and is very adaptive. We could say it's successful in evolution. Well, the same thing is true of sound. The sound waves are absorbed by cells in the ear. They stimulate the auditory nerve, which sends messages to our brains, and then our brains interpret that as sound. The same thing is true with molecules in the environment which we breathe in. They stimulate proteins that are in the nose, and then nerve cells send those messages to the brain, and our brain interprets those as scent. So the point that I'm making is we detect light with our eyes, but we see with our brains. We detect sound with our ears, but we hear with our brains. And we inhale molecules with our noses, but we smell with our brains, because our brains create a world of illusion. Now, in most cases, at least when it has to do with immediate survival, that works very well, because the illusory model created by the brain is very similar to the reality that's out there. Natural selection would get rid of any exceptions to this very quickly. If my model of the brain said that the edge of the cliff was not there when in reality it was, and then I walked over the edge of the cliff, natural selection would quickly get rid of that kind of defective model of reality in the brain. That is, if there was a delusion is an illusion in the brain which does not correspond to reality. But you know, sometimes natural selection can actually favor delusions as well. One commonly understood example of this is religious delusions. Now, I'm not saying that all religion is a delusion, but I am saying that some of it is. We all know examples of delusional religions. Now, that's usually associated with the political right. Seems to make a lot of use of religious delusion. Conservatives, however, are not the only ones that have delusions. Liberals can have illusions as well. You can think of examples such as the belief in the effectiveness of all herbal medicines, or the fear of all genetically modified organisms, GMO. And then, of course, there are kinds of delusions that we all can fall prey to if we're not careful. For instance, thinking, well, other people will get addicted to this drug if they take it, but I can take it and that won't happen to me. Other people can smoke and get cancer, but oh, if I smoke, I won't get cancer. And things like that. So, the point that I'm trying to make, to summarize up here, is that our brains create a model of reality that's actually an illusion, if it's correct, a delusion if it's incorrect. Now that we understand how the brain works, we can consciously choose the things that we are going to believe and to avoid delusions that are dangerous. This is what we have to do. This is what we can do. This is Charles Darwin. Tally ho, and amen.